Yeah, I think we've got so much to speak about. We may as well jump in to the juiciest topics of this weekend. And there were quite a few, to be honest, because on paper, UFC 299 was kind of absurd, really. It was well and truly stacked to the gills. And I would say, for the large part of that, it delivered. What do you think?
Yeah, see, I was about to come in with a bit of a hot take.
Here
I
we go.
felt like as I was watching it, don't you? I feel like you might agree with me on this. I call me crazy, but the magic just like wasn't there. Like it was a good
Mm,
card and I had a good time and it was entertaining, but I wasn't sitting there like holy shit, this is amazing. Do you know what I mean? Even though all the fights were
mm.
really fun, generally speaking, on the main card, there was some great moments. But I just didn't. I came out of it thinking like, well, that was fun. It was just another sort of good pay per view. I don't know if you're sort of feeling the
Why
same
was that?
sentiment there. I think I will say part of it is definitely because I had money on the line and I was quite stressed about it, which is just a good reminder to not bet because it kills your enjoyment of the sport. And I will actually, I'm gonna, what's the word I'm looking for? See, I'm still, my brain's a little bit fried, but it stressed me out. I had a parlay that was going, it didn't hit like they never do, but I came very close. I had a 7-leg parlay and Kevin Holland ruined my dreams. So never bet on that man ever again. And I will say credit to MVP, which we'll get into that fight. He put in a good show. But the card was fun. I thought all the fights were pretty good. I thought the Dustin Poirier knockout was probably the highlight of the night, and Sean O'Malley putting on an absolute title fight clinic. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say it was one of the most dominant title fights we've ever seen, if not the most dominant title fight. And you're going to get, and I have seen a lot of old school fans coming out of the woodwork saying that's a load of rubbish. I don't think it is. That was a 5-round beatdown on the level of Volkanovski Holloway 3, arguably
Disagree.
more so. I think
Disagree.
it's up there. Personally, well, let's get stuck into it. What were your thoughts on the main event?
For it to be that level of conversation, which I don't disagree in some part, because it couldn't have been more dominant, really. It really was a shutout from start to finish. But in truth, at no point was I surprised. So I found it
No.
hard to be amazed, because it speaks to how good I know Sean O'Malley is, and also how predictable Chito Vera is in his execution with high level guys. So when I merge those two things together, that's exactly what I anticipated. I went through all of my prediction videos and I said on the money, on the nose, every single time what was going to happen. It was going to be a case of Chito losing the footwork battle, Chito losing the speed battle, and Sugar staying on the outside for 25 minutes and piecing him up. So even just looking at the Volk Max Holloway fight, the level of competition was much, much higher. So
I agree with that. Yeah.
it was ridiculously impressive performance. Absolutely nothing away from that. It just speaks to the level I put Sean on, and I don't think Cheeto is on that level, or I never have thought he was on that level, which is why there was so much controversy around when Sean said, I felt like I'd never lost that. I know I lost, but I didn't feel like I lost, is because that is why. And the amount of stick he got for years, because people weren't actually listening to what he was saying. He was saying, yes, I know I have lost that fight, but I don't feel as a fighter, as a competitor, that I lost to that fight, if that makes sense. And this was the reason why, because
Yeah.
he just showed us, and I was never under any different illusion that it wasn't going to look like that. So it speaks to, again, the level of preparation. The only question mark, the thing I'll say on it is, the only question mark we had, and rightfully so, was what would he look like over 5 rounds? Because he has a very exhausting style, because he moves a lot, his output's very high, and in that big cage, that's a lot of footwork. It's a lot of footwork for 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it and you think, right, okay, what factors can we go off? His preparation, arguably the best in the UFC, or definitely in the top 3 in regards to his recovery, his strength and conditioning, his nutrition team. Everything is just the pinnacle. So he does that well. Okay, does he live like an athlete? He lives more so than an athlete of most of the roster. So it's sort of like, okay, everything leads to he can go a hard 5, but we'd never seen it. This weekend we saw it, and that was the final question that we really needed asking of Sean O'Malley. So I was impressed, of course,
I was
as I
very
always
impressed as
am,
well.
but I expected it because that's how highly I rate him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I did entertain last week. I said, I started sort of maybe chiming that Chito Vera had a chance at getting a late finish, and I thought the fight maybe was edging closer than I initially expected, because when this fight first got announced, the rematch, I said it was going to be an absolute walkover by Sean O'Malley. And as we sort of got closer, I think maybe the influences of social media may have sort of infiltrated my brain, and I didn't change my prediction, and I predicted Sean by decision. At least on my community Discord. I don't know I can't remember what I said last week specifically on the podcast, but I said a Sean late win, I believe. And that did come to fruition. And I thought he looked excellent. And as you said, the big question was, could his pace keep up over 25 minutes? And it did. He didn't really slow down at all. The one thing is, I think the word to describe him is brittle, because you saw him, he was limping afterwards. Despite the fact he barely really got hit, he was limping, he was hurting, he was aching, which obviously you're going into the fight, you're going to get burnt a little bit. But I feel like he didn't really get hit at all that much that fight, except from the very end. I have to say, weirdly enough, if that fight was 30 seconds longer, it actually could have been Anu, and I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, because that body shot he took, and he'll fully concede that he was lurching over and hurting, and you saw as soon as the bell rang, he sat down in the octagon. That could have been it. That could have been a win for Chito Vera, which is kind of crazy to say, considering how many shots he took sort of over that 25 minutes. It was unbelievable heart from Chito. That's the one thing you have to give him credit for, is his ability to stay in there, because that knee he took, I don't think anyone in that bantamweight division is taking it, especially not Merab Dvalishvili, who, after that performance, I actually think will lose to Sean. That is my initial thoughts. I was thinking that potentially in the build-up to this fight, I thought Merab is a little bit chinny, and if anyone can catch him, it's Sean O'Malley. After that Cheeto performance, I think he's definitely got a good chance. I don't think that's a crazy take anymore.
I think when you look at the performance and you look at the fact that a lot of people were saying this about Sean limping out, and he spent 25 minutes kicking and punching a steel rod, essentially.
Yeah, steel rod is the perfect description.
So
absolutely,
there is no surprise that he walked out of that fight equally beaten up, because yes, he quite literally didn't get a punch landed on him, but that's kind of irrelevant. In a fight, that isn't where the damage always comes from. A lot of the times the damage comes from you landing your own shots, especially if you're doing it cleanly and accurately for 25 minutes, landing heavy kicks to the body, to the legs, to the head. Just bouncing your shins off someone's head for 25 minutes is a lot of damage. And not just his legs, more so his hands. I would be shocked and I would be impressed if he hadn't had some break in his hands, because how clean he was landing with the power and the velocity on his face so many times. And the one thing I always say about Sean, and I give credit to Tim Welch as well, because the one thing that he does so impressively is punch at the end of his range. All of his shots are at the full maximum end of his range. And it comes down to a lot of the work that he does in the training room as well with Tim Welch. They work a lot on the paddles, which is not as typical with fighters. You don't see a lot of fighters do pretty much all of their work on the paddles, but he really does. And I've heard Tim speak about before how they use it a lot so he can really extend his punches. And when you're that tall in that division, it's one thing having the advantage there, but it's another thing using it. And not to mention the footwork, not to mention the agility and the ability of Sean. But the fact that he keeps people on the end of his punches, I just, coming into it, I said, Chito has a very high guard. I would expect him to go to the, I expect Sean to go to the body a lot. And he did. And it was a perfect game plan. It was an obvious game plan, I think. I think that is fair to say. I don't think, if I'm there breaking it down, I don't think it takes a genius to work it out. But it was executed to absolute perfection. And the thing is, it's like what you said with the body shot. And we said multiple times, Chito is dangerous for 25 minutes. And he proved that, because it was the 24th minute, 59 seconds before he landed his biggest shot. Like you just touched upon with that body shot, which best believe he would not have been sitting on the canvas at the end of that fight if that hadn't affected him. He wasn't meditating. He wasn't taking a breath. It was the body shot for certain. And I'm sure down the line he'll open up more about that, even though he has sort of admitted that already. But it's one thing I'll say, and then we'll go into obviously the next matchups. Chito Vera is one of the coolest people in the UFC. His aura, his charisma, his character, the way he dresses, just everything about him just oozes coolness. You know, he really is just such a chilled fella. But he is so frustrating to watch as a fighter, and let alone coach. You could see Jason Perillo getting come on, mate. Like, we've lost the last first few. We knew this was going to sort of happen. Come on, you know. And the way that I think about it is, it's really easy for us to sit here and say, "Oh, just go in the fire." You've got You've got Sean dancing at you, duking both sides. It's like, "Oh, come on, mate, just hit him." It's flipping hard to do, if not impossible at times.
Where I was going to counter.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. But my counter to your counter is, you're getting beaten up either way. You're on the end of his shots, getting beaten up, which is not great. So yes, if you crash into range and close the range, it's dangerous, but it's happening anyway. So you may as well give yourself more chance of reward than being on the outside and giving yourself much less chance of reward, because the outcome is still you are getting beaten up. That's my only point. And the only times that he did throw in between the punches of Sean, he then had success, which is where he found that body shot, because Sean was extending on the right, and that's the perfect time when he was breathing out and boom, landed the body shot perfectly on the liver. And that was when he had his moments in between the punches. But he would shell up, he would just guard up, he would wait, and then he wasn't there. Sean wasn't there for the count, because he wasn't necessarily countering, because he's not quick enough to do that to Sean. And then when he would come back, Sean wouldn't be there. He would be out of range. So it's obviously easier said than done. But
I think part of that does come with, as you said, the investment in the body early was a great game plan by Tim Welch, of course, because it's a known fact that Chito is a slow starter. He tends to give up the first 2 rounds to make his reads, / just grow into the fight. And we did see that gradually. But the diminishing effects of those body shots, I think his growth into the later rounds would have been far higher if it weren't for those investments in that straight 1-2 down to the body. I thought it was brilliant work. That was the clear takeaway I had for the fight. But I thought it was a dominant performance. I thought it was brilliant. I was a little bit stressed out because I was in the green that night in terms of money betting, because I needed that Sean fight to go over 3.5 rounds, and I expected it to, and it did, because Chito, his chin is made of steel, and I don't see it getting cracked anytime soon. In terms of what's next for him, I had a little chat about this with some of my followers on a stream yesterday. There's plenty of good options in the bantamweight division. Who would you match him up with?
Easy.
Hit me with it. I'm saying Song Yadong. That was my
wrong answer.
No Song Yadong?
Wrong answer. Okay. There is one answer and one answer only.
Hit me with it.
Petr Yan.
Oh, yeah, that's a good shout too.
Only fight to make.
Yeah, I'm there for that as well.
Only fight to make, because you've got Chito coming off a title shot that he's obviously lost. So anyone that beats him is then there or thereabouts for the title. And you have Petr Yan, who, yeah, he was on a little bit of a skid, but contextually, it wasn't bad at all. He's just fighting the best in the best division and coming up very, very short. And I think that makes all the sense in terms of the style, in terms of the matchup, and in terms of name value, in terms of what's next for them. 100%, I think it makes all the sense in the world to match them two up next. But I wouldn't be upset about seeing Chito Vera versus Song Yadong either, because that's actually
I think that's actually a better fight.
Yeah, that's actually
as a fight. Fun. I think that's an absolute banger.
Yeah, I think that's actually very fun. I think, obviously, like you touched on, Merab Dvalishvili versus Sean O'Malley is the fight to obviously make next. And I've been saying this for a long time, a very long time, as you'll know. I've spoken about it many, many times. I think Merab's a good matchup for Sean. I think he's a much better matchup than Corey Sandhagen.
Agreed.
I think Merab Dvalishvili is a horrible matchup for mostly everyone, including Sean to a certain extent. But if I'm Sean O'Malley and I'm looking at Merab Dvalishvili and Corey Sandhagen, that Merab fight is way more appealing because
I
as
agree.
good as Merab is, as much of a beast as he is, as much of a machine as he is, does he have submission offense? Not really. Does he do a lot with ground and pound? Not really. Does he give openings on the feet? Yes. Have we seen him get touched by lesser strikers? Yes. I think this is a good matchup for Sean O'Malley. And he's going into it as an underdog, which I understand because...
I really don't get it anymore.
I understand it because I know what the narrative is. Oh, he's an incredible wrestler. True. Incredible gas tank. True. And Sean O'Malley's just a striker and he can't grapple. But what people don't
Not
understand is you can't grapple what isn't there. What is not there, you cannot grapple. And Merab is always diving in for those single legs. And he's also leaving the pocket a little bit exposed. This is his corner's words.
Cejudo was landing over and over and over. It's there. It's absolutely there.
This is his corner saying this in between rounds. This isn't just me making an observation. This is his corner telling him this. I'm just regurgitating what they're saying. So for as good as Merab is, if I look at a fight between Sean and Merab, I think Sean puts him away. I really do.
I was saying this.
Do.
You can't. It's all good. It's all well and good having great cardio and being the machine. But if you can't use it because you get laid out inside 2 minutes, then it doesn't matter, does it? And I think that's definitely what could happen. I can see a very early finish for Sean because Merab is tuny as well. I said this on the stream yesterday.
I don't know about that.
No, he is. He recovers well, but he gets dropped very easily. And
he never got dropped.
Sean, if anyone can catch him flush, no one's going to catch him flusher than Sean O'Malley, if you ask me, with a counter shot.
True.
And Cejudo caught him good, as did Moraes. Moraes was probably one punch away from finishing him.
Yeah, but
dropped him 2 or 3 times.
Henry didn't drop him, and they both cracked him, but they didn't.
I'm pretty sure Henry did drop him, right? It was counted as a knockdown.
No,
I'm pretty sure he did. I'll have to check it afterwards, but either way, he caught him good. That's what we can both agree on.
Yeah, for sure.
Those opportunities are going to appear for Sean because those feints he throws, he had Cheeto guessing all night, and it's going to have Merab guessing. He's a far worse striker, and there's no disrespect to him. It's just how good Sean is, and I think that's going to be the difference maker if that fight gets made, which it looks like it will be. One thing I didn't like, I will say, just quickly before we move on, was him calling out Topuria, and you can see he almost backtracked it immediately after. He said, "Oh, if you guys want, I'll fight Merab too," because I feel like as fans we're getting sick of the super fights, and I was talking about this on stream as well. I think there should be a mandatory rule. Maybe a little bit.
No.
Obviously, you can bend it a little bit, but I think at least two title defenses minimum. I don't.
The
think
UFC don't have guidelines. They never will. It doesn't make sense.
No, they won't. I know it won't. I play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah,
but
I get what you're saying.
Get made.
I agree with you in regards to have a couple of fights. 100%. I don't disagree with that. It's just
it will never be a rule, of course.
Yeah, you're just never going to get that. And even if it were, it wouldn't. It would be bent a million times over because there'd be situations that would be required for that to bend. What I find funny. Last thing I said, what I find funny is the narrative. Ilia Topuria a couple of weeks ago is known as the most terrifying man in MMA at the lower weight classes, with good reason. Can't really grapple with him. You might get submitted by him, and if it stays standing, look what happens to mostly everyone he fights. The thing I find funny is the narrative is, Sean O'Malley is running away from a matchup with Merab. I was like, how does that even make sense?
He just wants to be a double champ. I don't blame him. I do it as well.
It doesn't even make sense. Yeah. He's quite literally the most terrifying man in the lower weight classes. Well and truly, he kind of is Ilia Topuria.
Just quickly, give me in as short words, as few words as possible. How do you think that matchup goes? There's an early prediction. If Topuria fights Sean O'Malley.
Okay, let me just. I'll be quick on this, but I'll give you my 2 cents very far out. Right. Yeah. Number one, the question is how long does Sean get to prepare for it? Does he get to put on a little bit of size, nothing crazy? Does his body change? That's my first question. My second point to that is, okay, let's have a look at the cons for both sides. The cons are Ilia Topuria, on occasion, does overextend. That is true. On occasion, he does overextend. Very small times, because he's an incredible striker, but he does overextend. So can someone capitalise that on if they're elite of the elite, like Sean is with the speed? 100%. He's also susceptible, been dropped twice, the only sort of holes we've seen, by the head kick.
Jai Herbert, right?
By the head kick, right? And if anyone can kick, going off of both stances, giving looks at different kicks, it is Sean O'Malley. Now, that's where I think there's interest there. Also, the last thing I'll say on for Sean's side is whatever you want to say about his aura, and if he tries too hard, and if he wants to be this and wants to be that, you cannot look outside of the fact that when the lights are on and he walks out and he steps into the cage, he performs. He performs.
Agreed.
And Tim Welch always says this. He is a Michael Jordan type athlete. And until I see otherwise, I'm 100% in belief of that. And every time I see him perform, that's what I see. So I don't think anything is impossible for him, because
I agree.
He has gone back 10 years and everything he said has come into fruition. Everything. Champion, most pay-per-views, biggest gates, biggest numbers, superstar status, crazy wins, knocking out champions, knocking out GOATs, all of these things all come to fruition. So it doesn't make sense.
I actually think he can beat him.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense for me to say, he's got no chance. He's done everything he said up to date. So there's nothing for me to believe he can't do something extra extraordinary. However, on Ilya's side, of course, phenomenal fighter. And he could implement a very aggressive grappling game of Sean. And even though Sean is a good grappler, he would be going up a weight class and giving up strength for sure. He would definitely be giving up strength.
True.
So even if I thought they would be somewhat competitive on the ground in jiu-jitsu terms, he is giving up strength, which then gives him advantage. And also, the thing with Sean is he is so tall and he has got a lot of torso. And Ilya rips to the body. And if he punches in between the punches, like Cheeto did, and lands to the body, and then finishes that with a right hook upstairs, it can be curtains, no matter who you are. So
that's true.
That's
Jai Herbert. Jai Herbert.
That's what I'm saying. That's my two senses on that.
I agree.
But
it's a great fight.
But it's hard to corner him off. It's hard to get him flat against the cage, Sean. Because that's what Ilya does to everyone. He corners them.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the future, because I do believe that matchup will happen. But the co-main event really was, for me, the highlight of the night. I thought it was a brilliant return to form from Dustin Poirier. And I said the other week, I think the only way I can envision it was with Dustin Poirier TKO him against the fence, because I thought Saint-Denis would be able to take a shot. He'd stay on his feet because I thought he had a good chin.
Yeah, he called that.
But he'd be able to take the shots and the ref would stop it. But he was put out cold by Dustin. And it was he's so good when he squares off against the cage with those counter hooks. When he's sort of dealing on a scramble and he'll square up with his feet and then land that left hook or that right hook shot. It's beautiful. And we saw that. Benoit Saint-Denis, he has a tendency to leave his chin open when he comes in sort of bull rushing. And that really was his end yesterday. He had a great first round. And obviously he started to fade going into that second. I don't know if it was adrenaline dump. I know there's a lot of talk about him having staph infection. And obviously the antibiotics are going to affect you. Mohamed Makayev last week was a perfect example of that. So that was definitely a factor. Do I think the result would have been the same either way? I do. I think Dustin's boxing, you could see the difference in striking. I think it was there. And he was looking for that shot all night, and he did find it. And I have to say, it was a beautiful performance. I was very happy. Not just because I got the prediction right, but it puts Dustin right back in that conversation for really one last chance at the title. He's in the same sort of boot as Justin Gaethje, the man he just lost to. And so right in that conversation for one last sort of run for the title, which I both want to see them make. Thing is, they're both in awkward positions because, especially Dustin, I'll just finish on this, is he's got two men, realistically, potentially three, who are ahead of him for the title, and that's Arman Tsarukyan, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Gaethje. And he's in a weird spot where he might have to fight down again. Nope. I think that really is his hand is being forced. So unless you have a good alternative.
I do have a good alternative.
Hit me with it.
He's fighting for the title next. There's no two ways about it.
Wow, that's what you're going with.
100%. 100%. The fight was made in fight week.
It's not been confirmed, though, is it?
Of course it hasn't. But you have Dustin Poirier, who, let's call it for what it is one of the biggest superstars in the sport, is now tied third, I believe, for most wins ever in the UFC. One of the most beloved, Incredible. Some of the biggest followings, some of the biggest pull. And then you factor in he's got the collateral damage or collateral exposure from 2 Conor fights and 2 Conor wins. one of the biggest names
resume.
in the sport. Ridiculous resume. You look at the people he's fought: the Gages, the Chandlers, the Oliveras, the Khabib. He's fought the biggest names in the sport. Khabib and Conor. He's fought 3 times against Khabib and Conor. That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah.
So when you talk about name value worldwide, there's no one bigger than Dustin Poirier. So that's the name that we're dealing with. That's the brand that we're dealing with. So there's no conversation required of win streaks and losses. And
No,
people,
of course not.
Absolutely
it's more
none
just
of
the
that.
circumstances around where the belt and the top 5 are right now.
Ali Abdelaziz came up to Dustin Poirier this week and said, let's fight Islam in June. He said, 100%. Then he wins and he comes up to him again. He says, let's fight Islam in June. He goes, 100%. So Ali Abdelaziz wants him to fight him in June. Islam 100% wants to fight him in June because stylistically it's a nice matchup and name value, there's none bigger, really. And the thing that is the most important in the UFC is timing.
Agreed. That's a good point.
Everyone else is not going to be ready because they're fighting in April. So that only leaves Dustin Poirier to be ready. And
it's a nice little window for him, actually. Yeah.
Does he hit the quota? And the quota is as follows for the UFC title shot. Have you won your last fight? Yes. Cool, you can fight for the title. That's the only quota that you require if you're a big enough star. Have you won your last fight?
Has anyone
come off a loss?
A title shot coming off a loss? Surely someone has.
Not off the top of my head.
Not including a rematch. Not including a rematch.
Not off the top of my head.
Oh.
But there maybe is 1 or 2. But that's the only quota. You just need to win your last fight. That is it. That is quite literally it. And he's done that in emphatic fashion, by the way. Emphatic fashion. So he'll fight for the title next in June, and I've got no doubt about that whatsoever.
Excited for it. If that ends up happening, I am all for it because it's a nice window for him to slip into. Because realistically, if he doesn't take that chance, he's going to be waiting and potentially have to take another fight, which at his age, I don't really think he can afford to do. So it's make or break really for him. So I'm excited if that fight gets made.
He won't
Obviously,
take
my immediate thoughts would be Makhachev, but I would love Dustin Poirier to become undisputed. I think there's none more deserving really in terms of career tenure and resume. I think there's none more deserving. So I'd love to see that. But again, that's looking forward into hypotheticals. Hopefully that happens. I think something that was interesting
last
about
thing
last night, of course.
Sorry, last thing on that, just before we go off that, because I've got to bring this up because this is actually wild. This is wild. The man has been competing for decades and he has he's gone 8-0. He has never lost 2 on the spin. Ever in his entire career. He has never lost 2 fights in a row. Every time he's lost, his next fight has been a win. Every single time. And people talk about legends, people talk about incredible records and undefeated. Things like that. Of course it's impressive. Of course it's incredible. But there's also other things that I find equally, if not more impressive. Like when you look at the likes of Bisping and how he achieved the title. When you have a look at the likes of Dustin Poirier and how he bounces back from a loss every single time. Longevity at the highest level. Yeah, I remember there was a question. I won't go off on a tangent too much, but when Jim Miller was, this whole discussion around UFC 300, and a lot of people were saying, he shouldn't go into the UFC just for having a lot of fights. I thought, and people at the highest level, Hall of Fame, sorry, people were saying this at the highest level, and I was actually baffled. I was hearing people like DC, and I was thinking, you know how taxing this is on the body. You know how taxing this is on the mind. How hard it is to be at that level. How hard it is to get to the top. How hard it is to get in the rank. All of these different things. And he's been doing that longer than anyone. More wins than anyone. More fights than anyone. All of these different accolades. More knockouts than anyone. All of these crazy things.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. It makes no sense. But sorry,
No. I actually spoke about that pretty much word for word on the stream yesterday. I think being in the Hall of Fame, it constitutes more than just being a champion. Uriah Faber's a perfect example of that. Never achieved UFC gold, but for one, is a pioneer of the sport, and two, is ushering in a new generation of fighters as a coach, with one of the most influential gyms in the world. So that is partially why he got in there. So it is more than just lifting undisputed gold. So that's why I actually think even if Dustin doesn't ever lift the title, I do actually think he'll probably be in the Hall of Fame.
100%.
At some point. Yeah.
100%.
But that's a conversation for very far in the future. what I'm trying to go on to think of a good segue, but there's not really much else
Talking
to
about
say.
far in the future,
Far in the
Song
future.
Yadong will be a champion not too far in the future, I would probably say, with that performance
You
yesterday.
think so?
100%. He's
I told you
26
he was
years of
good.
age. I know he
I
was
don't know if
good.
he's that good. I was very high on him last week. That first round was brilliant. He fought a great first round. So good on the feet.
He's fighting one of the pound for pound most skilled fighters in the world. If we go back, right, this is the thing with Petty Yarn. And there was a long time where I was a bit with Petty Yarn, not because of his skills, just because the way people would speak about him used to just miff me a little bit. And the whole thing with Aljamain is just, it used to just wind me up a little bit. But just as a fighter, unbelievable to watch, truly unbelievable. But if we go back and rewind a little bit and look at Petty Yarn's last couple of fights, he managed to survive with Aljo on his back for multiple rounds, which is the best back control in the UFC.
Corey Sandhagen can do it.
A lot of people haven't. So he could survive with the best person on his back for multiple rounds, which is super impressive. Then he goes and has an extremely razor-close kickboxing match with who's probably the best kickboxer in the UFC at the moment in Sean O'Malley. Then he goes and has, I know it wasn't a close fight, but he goes very close and competitive in the wrestling with Merab Dvalishvili. I know that Merab smashed him on the scorecards and smoked him in the fight, but he never really advanced wrestling position too many times, and he definitely didn't do any damage with it. So a lot of those positions were neutral. So if I'm not looking at the scorecard or how the fight looked, I'm just looking at skill. So, okay, he went skill for skill very, very close with Merab in the wrestling. He went skill for skill with Sean O'Malley. He went skill for skill. And although he's been a little bit behind every time, that just means he isn't as good as them in that department. But they're elite specialists in those things. Merab's an elite specialist in wrestling. Sugar's an elite specialist in striking. Aljo's an elite specialist in back control. And he's been a little bit just below all these people across all of the board, which makes him a freaking good fighter. Like,
yeah, he is, yeah.
An obscenely good fighter. So, against Song Yadong, and he fought this fight with one leg. And he's come out, had a difficult first round on one leg, and then not only just showed his unbelievable boxing and his footwork and his movement, but then he showed
when he
some
doubled
of his
up on the jab. That was
to
the
the
real game changer for
takedown.
me.
The timings on the takedowns were just flawless, and
phenomenal.
It was more so. It wasn't the skill I was as impressed with. It was just the mindset. It was the difference that just said, "I'm a champion. I am still a champion." And you're not quite on my level yet, and I will show you. Even though it was a very close fight, it was a very impressive comeback performance.
Agreed.
Very impressive.
I will say what also was impressive. There's the segue for you, Michael Venom Page. His performance at that age, turning 37, I believe, next week or the week after, to showcase that level of sort of ability at that age, very impressive. He shattered my parlay, so I was a little bit pissed off. But he fought a perfect game plan to frustrate a guy like Kevin Holland, who doesn't easily get frustrated. He's a guy who's quite lax because he can really always fight his game plan, even if he's winning or losing. He can still, sort of enact what he wants to do in the cage. And MVP allowed absolutely none of that. And you could see the frustration. I thought his takedown defense was pretty good. He's surprisingly strong. You could see the strength difference massively. Every time Kevin tried to initiate that clinch and look to sort of lock his hands together, MVP was having absolutely none of it. And on the feet, same story. Dominant, really. It's such an awkward style to deal with. It's a weird one because he's so unorthodox. You almost feel like he could beat anyone on the feet just because of that. Even if athletically he's not there and he doesn't match up with some of these guys. Ability for ability, because he's so hard to deal with and hard to game plan for. He's such a wild card, and that's why he's so exciting. And I do wish we got him in the UFC a few years earlier, because you could be really looking at like a top contender. And I don't think he matches up well with most of the top five and the champion, but it was a good performance, and that throws him right in the mixer. And they're going to push him fast because the UFC are aware of his age. He's not going to have much time at the top in this sport, so he's going to go for it. And I have to give him the credit because he's entertaining. His walkout was fun, even if Dana White didn't seem to reciprocate it in the post-fight press conference. You need people like that. I say this all the time. You need fighters like that who entertain outside the cage just as much as in. And I thought it was a, deceptively disciplined performance. I think people don't really take it for granted with all the showmanship how good he actually is. And he was landing that 1-2 down the pipe repeatedly, sort of not flush, but it was landing on Kevin's temple, and you could see he didn't like any of it. But I thought it was a good performance.
I would say that was the most impressive debut since on par with Michael Chandler came into the UFC
Yeah, that's a good shout.
and beat Dan Hooker on his debut with that knockout. Because it's one thing making your debut in the UFC, which brings a lot of nerves and brings more eyeballs than you're used to. That's one thing. But a whole other thing is bringing an enormous brand into the premier organization at the end of your career, where you have a minuscule window to do anything spectacular. And if you drop the ball, you really decide your fate. So you're coming into this with such a big brand identity already. There's even more pressure than it just being your regular debut, compounded by the fact it was one of the biggest cards in existence, technically the fourth biggest card in existence, against an absolute fan favourite, by the way, a superstar in his own right in the UFC. There's not many more known
Agreed.
or popular than Kevin Holland, because he fights so frequently. He fights all the biggest stars. He's very outspoken. He's very charismatic. And I was just unbelievably impressed. He actually had no right in winning that fight. And I don't just mean because of his skill, because obviously he's extremely skillful, but just everything going into it. You shouldn't really have any right winning that. Massive card, massive occasion, debut, coming towards the end of your career against Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is one of the trickiest matchups at welterweight and middleweight for the longest time. And the only way we've really seen him beaten before is typically in close fights, where people usually at middleweight just nullified his grappling just with a bit of a size and strength advantage. We've never seen Kevin Holland bamboozled on the feet. We've never seen that, ever.
He had no answer.
Oh my. I've never seen anyone make Kevin Holland look that bad. And that's the ability that MVP has. Because he is such an enigma, because he's so difficult to figure out, he can make you look so bad. And there'll be a lot of people watching that I don't know, the reception wasn't that crazy, but I couldn't have been more impressed, to be honest. Like you said, the shots he was landing, clean. And the only reason he didn't get a knockout is because Kevin Holland has one of the most unfair chins in the UFC.
Crazy.
It is ridiculous, by the way. We've seen that many, many times. So that was the only reason that he didn't get knocked out. Same reason as why Wonderboy didn't get a knockout either. But you look at the walkout, the composure. The composure to come out in the cape, to be standing there for about 2 minutes itself. He's he is a showman. And it's just bringing that to the biggest platform. How relaxed he was, how comfortable he was in the moment. And then to go and put that performance out. And then he's landing 1-2s down the pipe, almost dropping him. And then he's just sweeping him, throwing him to the floor. And then he's giving a little one of these.
A little emote.
A little one of these. Yeah. And I just thought, she's insane. No one does this to Kevin Holland. No one does this to Kevin Holland. No one does that. People out grapple him. Sometimes people beat him. But no one embarrasses the man who embarrasses people. No one does that. No one talks to the man that's big mouth. He just big mouth.
Big mouth.
It's like, it was a ridiculous performance. It actually was insane.
It was.
And he should, I said going into that, this is just because of how high I rate Kevin Holland. I just couldn't have been more impressed, man. Honestly, that was unbelievable. It was phenomenal.
Someone I was really equally impressed with. Obviously, there was the JDM Gilbert Burns fight, which I thought was an impressive comeback. But the one I was really wanted to highlight was far down on the prelims. Someone with equal as much flair and panache as MVP was Michel Pereira, because he made it look like a joke. Came out with a walkout little dance routine akin to that of Israel Adesanya against a very credible Michael, I can't pronounce his name, Olejaychuk or Oleksiejczuk, something like that. Oleksiejczuk or Czech. Very impressive
Michel
performance.
Oleksiejczuk. Cal
That's probably
Alexeychik.
it.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking now. Actually, that marks his 7th win in a row in the UFC. And I don't know if you remember this. This is one of the
Yeah.
first episodes we recorded. I said to you way back when, I was so impressed with him because he's able to merge that sort of showmanship and flair, which you can fully admit, and he'd probably say when a little bit overkill,
Oh,
you know, in his
100%.
initial run in the
Yeah.
UFC. And he sort of found this perfect balance and blend of discipline and flair, and it's working so well for him. And the move up to middleweight has clearly helped him because he was struggling at 170 pounds massively. And I've said I think I could see him fighting for the title in the future. He's only 30 years old, so he's just hitting his athletic prime. And I don't think that's even a crazy take. I think
No.
he's such a hard fighter to deal with. You disagreed with me massively back then, but I don't think he will now because
I think maybe because when you said, I don't actually remember disagreeing with you, to be honest, but if I were to disagree, it would be because you were not talking about, because he's only just recently done it, middleweight. And he was always fighting
I'm trying to remember which fight it was.
It was always it was only recent he moved up to middleweight, and because he had a long layoff. And at welterweight, he had no gas tank, and rightly so, because the man is about 210 pounds. So I 100% agree with what I said back then. But at middleweight, whole different proposition.
It's unbelievable.
Whole different proposition. Because he was cutting honestly, I always knew he was big. I always knew he was big, right? But there was this one photo I saw not that long ago of he went and trained at Extreme Couture, and he was standing next to Sean Strickland.
Sean Strickland, sorry.
Sean Strickland.
Sean Pereira. What am I saying? Yeah, Sean Strickland. I've used that footage actually in some of my videos. I've seen that video. I used that clip.
So you've seen them standing next to each other, and Sean is not a small person at all. He walks around about 200 pounds. He's about 6'2", 6'3", and he dwarfed him, and I was shocked. And when I knew he cut a lot of weight, but then when I realised how much weight he cut and how big he was, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be an absolute life changer for him. And he's just doing it at the right time. Like you said, he's athletic prime. And maybe people watched that and they thought, oh, that was impressive. And oh yeah, that was good and whatnot. But Michal Alexeychik is a dog. Dog. He's the one that melts people in the third round. He's that guy. He is not the one to get melted in the first. That is not who he is. He really isn't. And he just went out with those body shots, with the punches, with the kicks, and then just choked him. That was
standing as well.
That was wild.
He actually did that before, I believe. Who was it he fought way back when? He got a sort of standing rear naked choke. He sort of latches onto it. This was very early on, I think, when he just started his win streak again. When he was fighting welterweight. It was against the Dagestani, I believe.
Can't remember.
I'll have a look. Here we go. Zaleem Imdaev. Yeah. Okay. It was he hasn't actually fought since then, so I don't know if he's in the UFC anymore. But you know, he has a flair for the sort of it's sort of like MVP in the same way. You know, he's always going to have that as part of him. But as I said earlier, sort of merging that discipline, which he's clearly learned over the years, and the move up to middleweight, mixed with that showmanship that adds that unpredictability. He's looking like a real force in the middleweight division. I thought he was very impressive. And is he top 15? Is he in the rankings? I know he was not that long ago in welterweight. Let me have a look. I'm just going to have to do a little bit of fact checking because he's got to be close if he's not. Yeah, he's not in the rankings. And that shows you how stacked middleweight is right now. But yeah, I think he can definitely be in that conversation. I think the top 15 the top 15 is maybe not stacked. Actually, I'm looking at the names. Some of the names in there are good though. I mean, he's Fluffy Hernandez at 13.
Beast.
That's a matchup right there.
Been saying that.
Yeah,
he's a bad matchup for most people.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think he probably beats Michel. Just because of the stylistically. I think Michel's grappling is probably his weakest point, is wrestling. You know, he struggled with that in the past. He was getting out-wrestled by Tristan Connolly, who was a natural lightweight on short notice. So, you know,
but that just goes to show sometimes he's just a bit random.
Yeah, he was breakdancing before the fight even begun in that one, and he gassed out. So, and doing backflips. That's it. That's a different story. But honestly, there were some other fights on the card, but I'm not too bothered to get into them too much. I want to really discuss.
Are you joking?
What?
Literally my favourite fighter to watch.
Yeah, JDM. Go on then. I'll let you. Go.
You can't just brush over JDM. You can't just brush over JDM. Absolutely dispatching Gilbert Burns with horrendous horrendously bad intentions at the end of that fight. That was dominant towards the end. I know that people... It's going to annoy me. Because people just look at performances and anything that isn't them dominating at one point, they'll just see it as a negative. Whereas, of course, I'm not saying you can't ignore things that have happened, but to me, if you're getting taken down or eventually going to the ground with Gilbert Dorino Burns, and you're getting entanglements and he's getting hooks in and he's getting your back or getting a body triangle or he's in good positions for someone of that level, and you're managing to mitigate it, take no damage, take no submission offense of a threat, and get back to your feet, that doesn't say, oh, he can't grapple.
It shows you've been working with Craig Jones. That's what it shows.
I've been saying this, though, and I don't mean to keep saying that, but this is no shock to me. In my breakdown that I put out this week, I said this exact same thing. I said his grappling is underrated. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying it's underrated because he's got funky moves, and we saw that. We saw some of that
sweep.
That sweep. This is what I'm saying. He's not very conventional, but there's one thing that I loved. I absolutely loved, and any fighter could take something from this. He never settled for 1 second. He never settled in any position. No position he was in that fight, he settled. Not once, which is so important against good grapplers because you can't allow them to establish a position. And even though he was in bad spots, he never settled. He was constantly moving. He was constantly making adjustments. He was constantly looking for the sweep. He was constantly looking to get back to his feet. And he pushed a high pace. And then what happened? When he got back to his feet, he capitalized. So people look at that and they go, oh, he got taken down. I look at that and go, he held his own with one of the best grapplers we've ever seen in the UFC, one of the most accomplished jiu-jitsu artists, and he had him in some tricky spots. Then he got up to his feet and absolutely flatlined him. And he's still undefeated, and he just finished Burns. Who was the last person to finish Burns? Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman. Okay, so Kamaru Usman's the last person to finish Burns. And before that, I think it was a little while ago as well. So no one really finishes him. Maybe.
I'm going to test my knowledge there.
I was thinking Dan Hooker. But because I knew it was at lightweight, that must have been so long ago.
I've just typed in Burns on it's just come up with the NHS health guidance website.
And he needs that, in truth, because he needs the NHS after that.
Yeah, it was Dan Hooker. It was his last loss before that as well, was Dan Hooker.
This is my point, right? And that was at lightweight as well, so you could argue that wasn't his maybe most natural weight class. So no one finishes Gilbert Burns, really. No one does that. We've seen him in there with... Chimaev didn't finish him. Everyone's very high on Chimaev. But yet JDM, he rocks up. He doesn't say anything throughout fight week. He's going, yeah, it's all right, mate. He wears a little Street X top. He rocks up to the fight.
He's very chill, isn't he?
He gives you some of the sweetest boxing you're ever likely to see. He dismantles a top six with a devastating finish. And then he calls out the boogeyman of the division, Shavkat Rakhmonov. I go online, and no one is even talking about him in any good term.
Honestly, that crowd was the only downside to last night. The crowd was not giving energy. It's so weak and boring. Nothing. Like, not even for like guys they should be cheering for. Absolutely nothing.
It was empty. It was empty for about 4 hours.
It's ridiculous, wasn't it?
And they say, oh, it's the biggest gate. It's the biggest gate. And I think, yeah, okay, that's cool. That's impressive. And yeah, that's another statistic.
Because they're charging up the prices.
This is my point. How much of that is just because you're going into hotbeds of places, which I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but you're going into Miami, which is one of the most popular places in America at the moment, one of the most sort of raging places with all the lifestyle going on there at the moment. A lot of wealth. You're charging sky high prices for tickets. How much of that is just because you're getting more notoriety with the brand and charging higher tickets? I don't think it's really indicative of, so many people were raring to see this fight. Of course they were, but I don't think that... Do you see what I'm getting? I'm not explaining it tremendously well, but I'm just saying that didn't look like a crowd that was the fourth best... I know that's not how it works, but the fourth most excited crowd to ever see a fight, you know? You know,
Yeah, I mean, of course, the gate never reflects that. I mean, the London gate
no,
was fucking gargantuan just because the
yeah,
prices were jacked up to high hell. So, it's never a true reflection of how sold out an arena or necessarily is, or how big and excited the crowd are. I mean, the
but
fights were good, and it's a sad thing because a card like that with the performances that were on show deserved a crowd that was going to play off that, and it didn't get it, and that was probably the only real downside, and maybe a bit of reasoning to why I said earlier, but I didn't really feel like it had that magic.
it's
I
because
think
of
definitely
that.
in part that was because of that crowd,
That's
100%.
fair.
Now I say it, it's that sort of me connecting the
That's a
dots there for
that's
sure.
a very. You know what? When you said that earlier, I said, "What is that?" And then I thought, "Star power." I thought, no, that had that throughout the whole card.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
couldn't articulate it at
matchups,
first.
not really. And you're 100% right. That's exactly what that was. That crowd let down the card. Not the fact that it was unenjoyable. It was still a thoroughly enjoyable fight card, of course, and it had so many good moments. But the electricity it was lacking, at least through the TV screen, was there. Imagine if those fights, were in Paris.
Or London. Or Manchester,
Paris.
as it's going soon. Yeah, mate, that would be... Well, actually, to be honest, it was in Paris. It would probably be pretty silent.
After the mate.
Yeah.
Dustin Poirier's French.
Yeah.
It'll be
But yeah,
a
299 was a great card,
it'll be
yeah.
a half cheer.
But as I said, I think we just jump into some creative stuff before we round off. Obviously, you are continuing your Thailand ventures for the foreseeable future. I saw you starting some Muay Thai training. I thought you looked pretty good on the pads from my amateur perspective. I thought you looked pretty good considering you've barely done it before.
Yeah, no.
I have to say, yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, are you going to do anything else out there, or is it just Muay Thai?
I'm probably just going to do Muay Thai because when in
It
Rome,
is pretty fitting, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
when
when
in
in Rome,
Rome, and it's just I enjoy other aspects. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not at least at the moment, I'm not doing everyday training consistently. I'm not looking to get something, so I don't want to boil the ocean and try loads of different things and not get much better at any of them. I
Of course.
quite like the idea of just doing one thing and getting a fair bit better because I learn quite a lot every time I do it.
That's the best part.
I got some quite positive.
Any martial art,
I got some quite positive feedback on a couple of those. To be fair, but
on the comments, I saw
yeah,
they were like, people
I didn't get much hate, and even if I did, honestly, it wouldn't.
It doesn't matter, innit?
No, it'd be water off a duck's back. But
and obviously, you did. You went and covered one championship ringside with the blood on your shoes. I saw that. How was that? That looked pretty cool.
Honestly, that was the best experience. Fight experience, event experience I've ever been to. And it was an International Women's Day card. So it was just a women's card only. So I don't know what the atmosphere and crowd would be like at, say, I don't know, a even bigger event. But it was insane. It was honestly the most enjoyable event I've ever been to. That's most awesome. Enjoyable. And I haven't, as of yet, been cage side for a UFC event, but
that's about as close as you're going to get.
Almost sure that I would probably still enjoy that ONE FC environment more. I do believe that. I really, really do, because I got there, and obviously it just has a little extra panache because you're in Bangkok.
It does, doesn't it?
It's in an incredibly famous venue in Lumpini. It has so much history, it has so much culture, there's so much meaning to it. But the passion, I know a lot of people talk about this, but the passion and the energy from the crowd is, I've never experienced anything like it. And it wasn't even completely sold out, I would say. But when these people are walking into the ring, so for example, one of the ladies who fought in the main event, she's from Bangkok, or she's grown up relatively locally. When she's walking in, the atmosphere is just a different level because of the passion in these people's hearts, because of the way that they relate, the way that
it's different, isn't it?
It is so different. I'm seeing kids that are like quite clearly from underprivileged places running to the front of these little stands, screaming at the top of their lungs like they are seeing a superhero in real life. And you can see the people you can see the fighters as they're walking out, and to the left you can see the kids, and it's your mind is sort of flashing back to obviously when they were just there, and they were just dreaming of being in this spot. And you're seeing what
Mm.
the pathway to eventually riches from a very underprivileged
Yeah.
place and background is from. And you see it in just such a concentrated way. And the enthusiasm and the excitement behind it, honestly, it was giving me goosebumps thinking about it, because it was
I think part of
just
that comes down to just
intense.
how integrated that culture of Muay Thai is as a sport
Exactly.
there for so many years. It's just
Exactly.
we're well past that sort of first cycle. The way I'd compare it to is something like MMA as a sport in the UK. We're really still on that first
Oh,
cycle when you look at the
100%.
grand scheme of it. Compare it to something like Muay Thai in Thailand. It's, you know, that is the sport. It is everything to them. The same way football is to us, soccer for the American fans.
For sure.
Same sort of thing. And obviously that's why you get such a emotional, there's almost a sort of romanticism to the whole thing. And I have to say, some great camera work from you. I saw those photos you put on Instagram. Very nice. With the
Thank
golden
you.
confetti. It was awesome.
So I rocked up, and I didn't know what to expect, in truth. I really didn't. I did not know
That's
what
the
to
best part.
expect. Yeah, I always loved that. I rocked up, and there was a cool atmosphere. There was a nice buzz. It was early in the morning, which was cool as well. I'd watched the Anthony Joshua Francis fight in the car as I was getting there. And I rocked up, and they gave me this wristband, and I wasn't really too sure where I was going to see it, what they were going to do, all these different things. And she's walking me in. I've actually got a video of this. It's actually a really funny video, because I've got my mini camera. I don't mind recording things because it's not very obnoxious and it's not very obvious. So I just sort of hold it there. No one really even notices, and I capture everything. Because I bought this new, I've actually got it next to me, this. So I can literally just hold it there, and you can't really, it's literally so discreet. But this is DJI Pocket 3 is the best purchase I've actually ever made.
How much is that?
I got the creator bundle, so this with all the accessories was £615, and that was the best purchase I've ever made. I can say that with so much, and I've had it for about a week. Well, I have had it for a week, and I can say that is the best purchase I've ever made, hands down. And maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But so I walked in, and they've put a wristband around me, and I didn't know. She said, "Okay, cool. I'll escort you to where the thing is." I was like, "Okay, cool." And we're walking through the stadium, and then we walk through the entrance, cool. And we walk through the chairs and the bits, cool. We're on the ground seat, and I'm thinking, nice. I get a nice media local seat. Yeah, she's just walking me there, and then we're walking to the ring. And I'm thinking, hold on, what's happening here? We're walking to the ring, and then she goes, "Okay, so here's your spot," and it's on the ring. She's literally the ring. There's no one there because I was a bit early. So she says, "Okay, this is your spot. You can't really sort of wander around and whatnot, but you can just pull up here, and this is your thing." And I've gone to a Muay Thai event, only one, and the reason I loved it so much is because how close you can be to the action without a cage, without pillars, it's such a different experience to MMA, because you can literally be in the ring, and obviously at that level. And so I've got to my spot here. I look to honestly, I'm walking through it. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking, I'm really doing this right now. This is really happening. This is really happening. I'm in Bangkok.
That's what hard work gets you, man.
I'm in Bangkok. I've flown to Thailand. I'm working at 1FC. I'm being escorted ringside. And then as she sort of says, "Okay, cool, enjoy, have a good time," I look to my right, and Herb Dean's standing next to me. I swear to God, I've got it all on camera.
Oh my God. You got to show me this.
I'll have to show the footage, because it is
that was the last person. I was waiting for who it was. I was like, who is going to be here? It's going to be someone really cool. Well, no, Herb Dean is cool. That's not to say Herb Dean isn't cool. I like Herb Dean. But that's the last person I would have thought.
I just looked to my right, and Herb Dean is standing next to me. I was, "Morning, Herb. You all right, mate?" And he's like, "You all right?" I'm looking at the ring, and I'm looking up at the crowd behind me, and I'm just thinking, what is happening? Like,
yeah, that's how everybody feels, though, isn't it? It's the imposter sort of syndrome in you, really. You don't really feel like you're meant to be there, but you do. You deserve to be there. Because you wouldn't be there without the hard work you put in. And that's a hard thing to really reflect on. I'm the same. I think everybody especially in the creator sort of business, everybody really feels like that. They don't really deserve to be where they are, despite the hard work that they've all put in.
Oh, no, I didn't feel like that. Yeah. I felt like I deserved to be there. Yeah, no, I felt like I deserved to be there.
That's good. I think that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to get over as a sort of individual creator. It's a hard thing to acknowledge the success you've had and look back on where you've been and where you are now, it's definitely a difficult thing to acknowledge
It
and
was
get through.
more.
So
It was more
that's
so.
good.
It was more so the fact that I was obviously credentialed as sort of media photographer and whatnot. So it was more so. Number one, I did think someone was going to come round me and sort of. I've heard people say this before, and I guess it's called imposter syndrome. I won't. I didn't feel like that
Yeah, you get
necessarily.
what I'm saying, innit?
Oh no, you're 100% right. By the way, I was just saying I'll be
Mm.
transparent and say I didn't feel like that. But I 100% imagined every sort of time I was looking over my shoulder because I thought someone was going to come round and be like, "You can't be here. Like you're not
Yeah,
meant."
just salute. You just salute and walk out. You're like, yeah, it was a good run.
Literally, it's like you're not meant to be here. But it was more so just, even just being that close to the event, it felt so surreal. And I've had some cool opportunities. Obviously, got to work UFC Fight Week. That was cool. I've been to ringside for a lot of events and done a lot of cool stuff. Been fortunate, done a lot of cool stuff. I never had a moment where I just kept looking around and just thinking, wow, the production, the lighting, the feel, the energy, the vibe. And I was just thinking,
That's
this
great.
is such an unbelievable event. And what you touched on there, thank you about the photos, because I was trying to do a million things at once. I had my phone, I had the DJI,
Yeah,
and I had my
100%.
camera. So most people are there just as photographers, right? And they're just like trying to get. They've got the most amazing camera equipment. I got mine off
I
Facebook
thought yours looked great.
Marketplace. I got mine off Facebook Marketplace for a couple £100, and a lens was given to me by a friend. I'm looking to the left, and they've all got G Masters, which are £3,000 cameras, and all these things, getting the crispiest of shots. But
I don't know about that.
no, I know, but I'm sitting there looking around, and I'm
Yeah.
just thinking, this is unbelievable. And then at the end, obviously, ONE FC is very famous for the confetti, right? When you win the belt at the
Yes.
end, and then the confetti. I've been to a lot of sporting events. I've been to a lot of sporting events in general, not less MMA and Muay Thai and things like that. I've never had the feeling of when that just went shoom, and the whole arena was just covered in gold in the ring on the white canvas with the belt. And
Oh,
by
it's
the
great,
way,
isn't it? It's the colours.
the belt is the most attractive belt in MMA, I believe.
Really?
A
I do
hundred
disagree
percent.
with you. I do think
A
it's great. I
hundred
prefer
percent.
the UFC one,
I
but
don't at all. And I'm not just saying. that.
they're both great though.
I've
They're
always
both
been.
great. There's no disrespect.
Don't get me wrong. They're both very, very good. There's just something I don't know what it
Yeah,
is about that one. I just kind of like a little bit more. But
it's great.
we're splitting hairs. But the point is, it's just when that gold's filtering down, and obviously it's just all landing on you. I'm taking pictures. It's going in front of the lens, and there's this just person. I've got the kids behind me screaming, like 7-year-old kids screaming at their idol. And there they are just standing with the gold belt, the confetti's going down. I just
It's
thought,
awesome.
this is honestly the coolest moment in sport I've ever been a part of. And
That's awesome.
it was honestly the most incredible event. And I've gone to a lot of things where I thought, oh yeah, that was fun, that was cool. I've never come back from something like, I need to do that again. I came back and was like, I need to do that again. I need to. Not I have
You're
to,
making me
I
jealous.
need
You're
to.
making me jealous.
I
It's fun,
need
I
to
can't
do that
lie.
again. And I will do that again. April the 5th, I believe, Gregorian is fighting, and that's for the belt. And I want to be there for that because
Get up for it. You'll be 100%. Go
it
for
was
it.
it was unbelievable. So
Not
yeah, I know,
not gonna pretend I'm not jealous. I can't lie.
yeah,
That sounds like a good time.
I
I
know I
think that's
went
the
through a lot
advantage
there,
doing
but
something. No. Go for it. I think that's the advantage. Something in that sort of vein of work that you do definitely lends it to more opportunities in terms of travel. As I said, that's what you were aiming to do, and you're doing the things you want to do. So of course it works out. So successful week for you. I'd say the successful week for me as well. I have to say, I think we
nice.
both had a good week. Yeah, I mean, mine's a bit more boring in terms of just metrics, but it's been probably the best week for my channel ever in
Wow,
terms of every aspect. It's
nice.
been great. Yeah, the growth has been
Congrats.
pretty crazy, I have to say. Yeah, and I don't want to delve too much into like the semantics of it, but just the viewership, the support I've had in the comments, and obviously the streaming, I've been keeping more consistent with that. It's been incredible growth, and I'm happy to be transparent really about the monetary side of it,
For
because only
sure.
because it's a significant milestone. It's not a flex. It's just quite an important moment for me. It was the first time. So in a 28-day period, which is what YouTube marks it as, um, it's the first time in 28-day period I've hit £1,000 in revenue, which is quite significant for me. So I was pretty proud of that, I have to say.
Well done.
Of course, in the viewership as well, my most viewed video, which is like 4 months old, is sort of having another lease of life, and it's just hit 300,000 long-term
Wow.
views, which is absolutely batshit. Um, Again, it's hard. I said this earlier when you were just talking about, sitting cage side or ringside. Sorry, it's hard to really acknowledge the success you had and not take it for granted anymore, and appreciate what you've done. And I'm slowly learning to do that.
Mm.
And yeah, it's been a good week. Been, some, outside of YouTube, it's been pretty good. As I said, doing the gym, just trying to find more balance with life. And I think that's just reflected really. It's just been a good couple of weeks across all fronts. Nice bit of stability, I think, just with work, which is good. So yeah, looking ahead, I'm working on my big project. I'm actually going to finish the script tonight. So I'm actually going. I decided, I spoke to you the other week about whether I keep uploading or not. I'm not going to do that over the next couple of weeks. We're going full steam ahead. The script's going to be finished tonight, and
Wow.
for tomorrow we are going full steam ahead of my hour-long video, which I honestly do think is going to be my best and biggest video yet, both as objectively as a piece of content and as well as how it performs. I think it's going to do really well. So I'm so excited to make that. And it's nice. I kind of prefer working on a bigger thing. It gives me
Mm.
much more motivation because I'm not always thinking about the next thing ahead. It gives me a good bit of time to just say, right, this is all I'm putting my focus on right now. This is it. Everything is going into this. And I quite like that. So that will be out. I think I said the goal is the 6th of April. So the week before UFC 300, maybe 2 weeks before. We'll have to see. But we're
Nice.
going full steam ahead, and it's going to be absolutely awesome. I cannot wait.
That's a very, very big milestone actually, because a lot of people, obviously the people we make this for creators, and it's always good to sort of understand what does it actually look like, how do you do that, how does that all work. But when you look at it like that, you're coming very close to what is essentially sort of a minimum yearly salary, right? Which is firstly super impressive because we're both, not just yourself, like we're both very new to the space, and
Exactly.
there's no blueprint, there's no one teaching us, there's no one, and we're all just sort of scratching and clawing and trying to find our own way. And obviously as well, we live very humble lives where we don't need a lot of money so that we can do this.
Yeah, my expenses are very, very small.
Yeah, very,
I don't
very,
spend a lot.
very fragile. I know it's the same on my
Hang on a
behalf.
minute. You're the one in fucking Thailand right now. So
Business
no, I'm
expenses,
joking.
mate.
I'm joking. Business expenses.
Legit.
Very true. Very true. I'm devil's advocate.
But as you'll know, and I'm not just saying this for my own sake, I'm just saying this because if anyone is listening, it's important to know. It's like what we always speak about. You have to know how much of a priority it is to know how to adjust what you do in your life. I know it's my number one priority, so my life is adjusted as so. So I won't go for meals. I don't go out for birthday events. I don't go to just general events. I won't go to eat. I won't buy a soft drink in the shop if I'm feeling thirsty and I'm out in London. I won't buy lunch. I won't buy a meal deal. I won't buy all of these things.
I'm guilty of that last one. I have to say that one I cannot concede. I will listen. I thought that one today. I was annoyed on the way back from the gym. I was like, damn, I want a meal deal, but I didn't. So there you go.
Nice. But it's just important to know. And sometimes people think, oh, that's the only way you have to do it. But it isn't necessarily. It's just about understanding how much of a priority these things are for you. And the reason, it's funny you said that actually. Hold up, you're in Thailand. Well, the reason that I was that way, or I am that way, is because if we're looking at my life and my sort of work priority, it always was to be able to do this and be able to travel. So that
Absolutely.
is actually, so it was always for that very reason. And because of what I do, I can integrate the two. So now I'm fortunate enough to be in Thailand and call it work, and to go to 1FC and to be creating videos and to be training and to be putting my training cost to a business expense, to be able to create content and to be able to monetize these different things. That's what it all comes down to. So even with what you said there, it's firstly very impressive that from scratch we're both at a point now where we can generate thousands of pounds a month just off through MMA, really, because that is the beginning of this. This is the very, very
exactly. This is only a year and a year and a half of work
for sure.
And well, really, only monetization for me was late January last year. So a bit over a year, really, if you want to talk about from the ability to earn money, that start at that point, in that time frame, I think it's impressive. Like, I mean, I'm
100,
gonna pat myself on the
100%.
back from there because it's like it's difficult to do. Most people can't do that. So
It's
it's not about
100%
not necessarily
impressive.
about even putting in like an insane amount of hours. It's not always about that. It can be about knowing what you need to do to get to those places, so you can use less time, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's being more resourceful and more knowledgeable about the area which you're operating in. And over the last few months, I've really reflected on that, comparing to my old stuff. And as you said, you say it all the time. Mistakes you make and you learn from, and what you're talking about in building that course. All the stuff you did wrong, you can teach only the things you need to do right. So I think as creators, that's always something we're improving on and learning on. So
So flipping annoying
yeah,
because I've built
yeah.
that, I've created it, I have all of the materials, but TikTok underwent an upgrade on it, or a service upgrade, on January the 8th. I even remember the date, and they said it's going to be a maintenance services thing for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. It said originally, which would be the end of January. It's now the middle of March and it's still not back up. And I have all the flipping materials sitting there. It took me hours. It took me weeks to curate the information, and then it took me hours to film it all because it is hours of worth of course. And I'm
Mm.
just sitting on it and I can't even flip and give it to the people. But it is what you touched on. It's like it's easier said than done, what you said in regards to working more efficiently, because how can you work more efficiently when you don't know what's efficient,
Yeah,
especially
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You learn from
yeah,
that, and then you
no, of course
realize
you do,
you streamline everything,
of course
and
you
that's
do.
that's kind of the point I was making. I've learned to do that absolutely. Like my productivity in terms of the amount of stuff I'm creating, and I'm putting in more hours, but than when I first started, because obviously I'm not at university anymore. But the amount of content and the quality of the content has just leveled up massively, even if it's the time frame. It's not the same amount of time put in, or only slightly more. Well, I don't know. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
Better work in less time is what I'm saying. So more bang for your buck. That's probably the phrase I'd use. So yeah, I mean, it's been a good week for you, been a great week for me. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I think this is episode number 41 of the MMA Creators Podcast. Again, apologies for this coming out on a Monday. We will hopefully be out to our regularly scheduled programming, and we will see you next Sunday.